Today is Tuesday, December 26th, 2023, and you have found the Living Youth Podcast. I'm here as always with my podcast co-host, Mr. Wallace Smith. How are you doing, Mr. Smith?
I am doing wonderfully. It's been a rainy day, and it might sound weird, but I love rainy days. And they put some people in sad moods, and they just, put me in a happy mood.
What it does to me is it makes me walk into my warm and cozy office and be thankful that I work in an office. I did quite a bit of landscaping work when I was younger, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. But this is the kind of day where you're thankful you got an office job.
Yeah.
Well, what do we have on tap, and what special guests do we have this afternoon?
We do have a special guest today. Today we have visiting with us from the Great White North. Or in Northwest, or white? Should I call it white? Great, like, is it snowy? Is that
left coast?
The left, from the left coast, but up north of the left coast. Yeah. We have visiting with us Mr. Barry Walker, minister in Canada. He'll talk more about himself later. Don't want to preview too much, but you want to say hello to everyone, Mr. Walker?
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for this awesome opportunity.
We're very happy to have you. And the topic today is going to be about Christians and sports. In particular, sports and young Christians and the things that you face and the pros, the cons, and you'll see why Mr. Walker brings some special expertise we're looking forward to hearing. So let's jump into it. Thank you for staying through our little music for a little ways. And it's wonderful to have you here on the Living Youth Podcast, and very excited to be here. Let me add my comments to Mr. Robinson's earlier, being in a nice warm place. I mean, I do like when it rains. In fact, even at least once today, I turned the lights off in my office so I could just look out the window a little bit, just kind of get my eyes off the screen. And I do like the rain, but it is nice to be in a warmer place than stuck outside.
Mr. Walker, being on the left coast of Canada, what is your winter time? I mean, does you still get plenty of snow, or is it a little more like rainy and cold?
On the left coast in Vancouver Island, it's rain, and a little more rain. Up in the interior where I live in the Kelowna, the Okanagan Valley, it's more drier in the valley and snow in the mountains.
Okay.
Making for a very good climate to grow fruit and vegetables and ski in the mountains. The ski hills are very nice there.
Dry, so good powder.
Yeah. Champagne powder is the way they describe it there. I don't know if you've heard that term before.
Really, I've never heard that term before.
Champagne powder is the way they describe it.
Wow. Okay, so we're kind of already getting into it because most of our listeners probably have no idea who you are. Nothing against you, just says nothing personal. But this is their opportunity to learn who you are. So before we get into other things, would you mind, and this is something Mr. Robinson and I particularly enjoy on the podcast, is having ministers on where people they may not know who they are, and it's a nice chance to learn about others in the ministry and sort of flesh out the picture of the ministry. So if you could summarize just a little bit about yourself, you've already kind of started with where you live and what areas you serve, and we would love to know.
Okay, sure. Well, I was actually born and raised on the West Coast in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, just outside of Vancouver, about 30 miles outside Vancouver, and grew up there with three brothers, four boys in the family, so it was an interesting childhood, very competitive. And I think you would probably know what I mean by that, Mr. Smith.
I would. I was going to ask, there's no sisters to dilute any of that?
No, we wouldn't allow it, actually.
Should we just get the names of your family out of the way?
Well, yeah, I guess we might as well do that because I know that you were going to bring that up a little bit later. You've done your research. So the whole family is Larry, Mary, Barry, Carrie, Gary, Larry.
But, of course, that was not intentional.
Not at all. No.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that your parents didn't plan that, and I find that hard to believe.
Well, I still do. 60-plus years later, I still don't believe them.
I met a family here, the family weekend, where all the males' names start with A, but they own that was a plan. They did that on purpose. Yeah. That'd be like the Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, where all the
right.
boys are named in alphabetical order, and it's like, oh, what an accident! No, that wasn't an accident.
That's right.
So you've grown up there like your whole life there, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much my whole life. My wife was born in the same town as I was, and we went to the same high school.
Wow.
And we met in high school as friends. She was actually more of a friend with my brother next to me initially, and then I sort of took over when he faded away out of the scene, and so we became good friends. And her family was involved in the church at that time, so that's where I first came in contact with the Worldwide Church of God. After myself, before meeting her, I was looking for some religious truth of some sort. I had no idea what I was looking for. I just read the Bible, word for word, and repeated the Lord's Prayer at night, like I thought everybody should do, because I didn't know any better.
Right.
So when I
you
met,
you were about 18 at that time.
I was about 16 when I
about
started
16,
doing
okay.
that. I met her at about 17, and then attended my first service at about 18 when I asked her to go to an event of some sort on Saturday, and she said, "I can't. I'm going to church." And I went, "Oh, that's interesting. On Saturday yet?" So,
Yeah.
but it didn't take long to figure out that it was pretty interesting to start with, and pretty accurate later on once I did my research. And certain things intrigue you when you hear the truth of God. And the first truth that really intrigued me was the resurrections. The resurrections that blew me away.
That's what grabbed your attention.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because growing up, all you hear about is heaven and hell and that whole concept, and it didn't sound logical. It didn't sound like a God that cared about people to me.
Right.
So when I heard the concept of the resurrections, I thought, man, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so that's what grabbed me first, and then it went from there, and a few other things that I found very interesting as well, related to sports even, for that matter. I mean, the whole concept of running a race to win the prize, as Paul talked about, was very intriguing to me. I mean, and as I grew in knowledge and understanding of God's way, that concept, as it related to our pursuit in our Christian lives, was amazing. As a teenager and a young person, I thought that was very truthful and honest, and there's something to that.
Versus the idea that it's all been done for you, there's nothing for you to do.
Yeah.
Instead, no, God actually wants you going for the gusto. He wants
Doing something and earning that prize at the end of the race, right? And
Right. Well, I'm very sympathetic to that. I've mentioned before on the podcast that I had also a friend in high school, and I should just stop there, and it sounds really sad. I had a friend in high school too, but no, who was in the church. And the first thing that got my attention in that case was the feast, because I didn't kind of relate at all or connect on Saturdays, but I remember that she left for the feast, and I thought, well, what kind of religion do you miss 2 weeks out of school? That seems sacrilegious to me.
Just go somewhere to eat all the time.
Exactly right. And then she stopped by. She'd actually bought the feast was in Mexico at the time, and she had bought she came back with some of her presents for some of her friends at school even, and it was like a little stone chess set. It was pretty chintzy little chess, but I kept that for a long time, and that was kind of one of my first feast gifts. I didn't even necessarily know, but we had a commonality in that the church I attended didn't keep Christmas as a religious day, but they did think it was okay to keep. That if you want to do all the trappings, they were fine with it, but they didn't think it was Jesus' birthday. And then I remember talking to her on the phone once about that, because I think, oh, look at me, I'm all spiritually knowledgeable and advanced. She goes, oh, you shouldn't even do it at all. I don't even know why are you doing it. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
really? Well, prove that. And yeah, one thing led to another. It was that, wait, these people really do know something that's in the Bible that others don't. So very sympathetic to that.
I grew up with that very same scenario. That's the way I grew up, with no religious aspect to it, just the traditions of it.
Interesting.
And so, my mom and dad never stepped foot in a church ever.
Really?
And so, I was very much what you would call a black sheep of the family. I stepped out of the norm in our family, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why at this point, but then I did not know why. When you get the whole concept of choosing life or death thrown in front of you, and you understand what that means, you better choose correctly.
The one to go for.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, you said that when you did start getting serious about all of this, how did they react to that? What did they think of
It was, first of all, shock and surprise at the same time. And but once we progressed through the initial shock, and I married the person that I met in high school,
Right.
and we kept going to church. We started having children, and they grew to, to accept the whole idea of it. And,
Right.
they thought it was weird.
Right.
And crazy that they couldn't buy gifts for our kids,
Right.
on their birthdays or Christmas and so on. But when we explained to them that we have this other time of the year that you can buy them a gift if you like, and they did. They started buying our
good for
kids feast presents. They
Good for
buy
them.
so it went fairly well. My brothers were a little bit more irate about the whole thing, I guess.
Oh,
you could
really?
say. Yeah, they made some comments that I can't repeat here.
I'm sure.
And,
being brothers,
it was interesting to say the least. But
Well, speaking of brothers, maybe this is a good time. So we assure you we're not going to spend the whole time quizzing you about him.
mm-hmm.
But the fact is, you are related to sports royalty in some way, aren't you? You come by sports royalty. I don't know if that makes you a duke or an earl or exactly how all that works out.
Court jester.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So our audience probably wouldn't know. So who is it you're related to that I have in mind?
Yeah, well, it was the last one on the list that when I mentioned the names. Larry Jr. is my dad's name was Larry, and Larry Jr. was very talented. He had a lot of skills, a lot of what I describe as hand-eye coordination. He had tremendous hand-eye coordination, and I think every good athlete is born with that ability. It's their. I believe it's your God-given gift. Is hand-eye coordination. Not everybody has that, and he had a lot of that, and he pursued it in a few different sports, and he managed to find his calling, so to speak, in the world of baseball. And so he went on to do very well in Major League Baseball, playing for 3 teams, and just recently being inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Which makes him the second Canadian in the Hall of Fame.
The 3 teams. At least one I know was the St. Louis Cardinals.
That's where he ended his career.
That's where he wrapped it
started
up.
in Montreal, and went to Colorado. He was in Colorado for the bulk of his career. That's when he went into the Hall of Fame as a Colorado Rocky.
Okay.
You can actually pick the team. He could have picked the Montreal Expos, I believe. I think that's the way it worked, but he chose Colorado because he was there the longest. And they appreciated him more than they did in Montreal, quite honestly.
I'm sure that does make a difference.
In fact, I was just showing a video to Mr. Weston last night. I asked him if he ever remembered the time Larry went back to Montreal the first time after he went to Colorado. And he said, no, I don't think I've ever seen that. So I pulled it up on YouTube. And it was interesting because he left Montreal under the free agency aspect of sports, which so we won't get into that because that'll bring out the worst in me. I'm not a free agent fan. But anyway, he went there because Montreal didn't make an offer. They didn't want to keep him. They didn't think they could afford him.
Really?
Was the reason that he signed with another team, which is, interesting. But when he came back to Montreal for the very first time, his first plate appearance, he got dramatically booed.
Did he?
People were blaming him for leaving their team. Leaving a Canadian team is not a good scenario. So he got booed.
Treated like a traitor, huh?
Exactly, so to speak. Yeah. So his first plate appearance, he hit a home run,
Did
and they booed even more at the first home run. His next plate appearance, he hit another home run.
Wow.
And the boos sort of faded a little bit, half cheers, half boos.
Really?
The third plate appearance, he hit another home run.
Wow.
And they gave him a standing ovation.
Nice.
Good for them. Okay.
So that was
That's
it was
nice.
very interesting. Anyway, just a side story that it means nothing, but it was interesting. But
So what if he had, instead of signing with an American team, had gone to the Toronto Blue Jays?
that was talked about at the time. That was a possibility, but it's all relative to, because professional sports has turned into a business, right? It's not sport anymore. It's a business. If you've seen players show up at the baseball field, you would think they were bankers rather than athletes. You know, they come in wearing glasses when they don't really wear glasses, a briefcase in one hand, and they typically, I mean, it's changed a little bit now. They come in dressed quite differently now, but when Larry was playing, that's the way it was. it's all about business, and it was whoever was going to offer his agent the most lucrative deal, right? So
Right.
that's why you choose the team that you go to.
So I was in the 90s was doing a basketball fantasy league, and then we started a baseball fantasy league. And I'm trying to remember, I either had your brother on my fantasy baseball team or I tried to acquire him and I couldn't. And I can't remember which. But he was there. I was like, man, what an incredible hitter there in Colorado, which was a good place to hit. And I would just encourage our listeners, if you're a sports fan, go back and look at his career. It's pretty incredible. I think he played 17 years.
It was around there. I can't remember exactly, 17 or 15. I can't remember.
See, I remember that he was a prolific hitter, but what I had forgotten was that he was also considered a five-tool player. So he had plus defense, speed. He had 30 stolen bases in 1 year where he'd hit 40 home runs or something.
What was
like
that term you used? A what player?
A five-tool player.
Five-tool player.
Yeah.
That means you hit for average, you hit for power, you have a strong throwing arm, an above-average throwing arm, and then your glove. So the defense is above average in speed.
Yeah.
So those are very rare.
You basically excelled in every aspect of the game. You were good at every, and typically that's not true with every player.
Right.
They have their specialties and what they do specifically. The classic example is what they call a DH, a designated hitter, who hits for the pitcher.
Right.
The pitcher never hits. So basically all he can do is hit. Usually they can't even run.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, and probably not even fast.
That's right.
Well, if he hits the ball, he's got to run the bases, right?
Yeah, but the anticipation is going to hit it out of the park, so he can
Got
just
it.
trot around the bases.
That's right, because that's what you brought him in for.
That's
was
right.
I appreciate talking to you guys. Some of our listeners might know, maybe they don't, but I'm not sportsy. I was never sportsy. I was the pencil-wielding nerd in school. And so talking to you guys, Mr. Robinson as a friend makes me feel a little more sportsy when he says sports things, but I don't always understand them, but I feel more sportsy. And now having both of you, I feel like I'm basking in sportsiness.
Let me tell you what your benefit is versus his. I mean, there are so many statistics in sports today that I can't even understand what some of them even mean, quite honestly. And you would probably be able to figure it out before I could.
Hearing him say those things, I have heard that before, and they would talk about sports statistics and statisticians, and all of these things, and I think, well, how they scored a run or they didn't score a run. But then I hear breakdowns like that. That's why I was wondering what that meant. That no, they measure everything. And that's part of what
they do.
And then nowadays they'll make video games, and I'm assuming they'll model those games based on a lot of those on some of those statistics. I wouldn't know.
The advanced metrics are pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one example. It's not a baseball one, but Klay Thompson for the Golden State Warriors, and he suffered some serious injuries, was out a couple years, but finally came back, but he wasn't shooting as well. And then somebody's explaining why he's not shooting well. Well, believe it or not, every single shot he's ever taken in the NBA over his 10-plus year career, the trajectory or the arc has been calculated on every one of them, and he has this perfect 45-degree arc, but now he's shooting at more like 43 degrees, and he's left. They literally track everything that a player does these days.
Well, and it's getting easier. I saw, it was only a month or so ago, but they were displaying, now they have so many cameras, they can do a volumetric recording of a game where the cameras are literally capturing virtually every detail, and you can, and you now with glasses on, you can watch the game on your table, this kind of augmented reality. And you're not actually seeing footage of the players. You're seeing the players have been modeled so precisely, but you're watching it in real time. And so they can actually take the cameras and virtually move them around the field where impossible camera shots, but they've actually modeled the players so accurately, and they've used AI to fill in tiny gaps where the camera maybe not have captured what a player did do, but it captured some after and some before, and the AI was able to fill in the gaps, and they compare it to the actual footage, and it's quite spot
Amazing.
on. So nowadays, they not only get that, but they're literally recording every element. They can get how many inches high the guy jumped. They can get the angles of the.
Yeah.
So I do find all of that fascinating. And we don't want to just focus on your brother. You're a sportsman yourself. You've played sports, right?
I started there. That's right, it's an interesting progression of events as well. I mean, it's in high school I played hockey and baseball, same as my brother. All the brothers did. We all played hockey and baseball specifically.
So the whole family was really interested in those two sports.
Oh
All
yeah,
the kids, man.
yeah. In fact, one year, when I was about how old would I have been? I'm in my 20s, I guess. One year, all the brothers and my dad played on one major men's fastball team, on the same team,
Oh, that's
all of us
cool.
together. Larry was only my youngest brother was about 16 or 17 at that time, so I would have been about 25, 26, I guess, in that age. But so I was attending church. I was as a church member, baptized by then. But we all played together, which was probably one of the most funnest years I ever had in sports.
Yeah.
Playing with my dad. My dad was a very good baseball player too. He played semi-pro in the States when he was a teenager. And the other brothers were good players. So that was fun. Maple Ridge Lanes, the bowling alley. That was the name of our team, Maple Ridge Lanes. Just to throw a little bowling in there.
Okay, well, so I have a question about that. I have two questions, and you can answer them in whatever order you want. You're coming into contact with the church. Like, I was never ever going to be an elite athlete, but I was good enough to play basketball and could have played on my high school team. But just with the Friday nights, that immediately knocked that out. How did you reconcile in loving sports, but with also the limitations that naturally occur when you're in God's church, and with the Saturdays are always busy?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I'd love to hear. So not only did you become the black sheep of the family by joining a religion, and not just any religion, by their reckoning an odd one, but you went on to become a minister. I would love to hear like the kind of the track and how that came to be, and and your thoughts about that journey.
Sure. Well, the second question I can't answer at all. I have no idea how that happened. But no, I'm just being facetious. But it was interesting because I remember playing quite competitive baseball and hockey when I developed my interest in the church, or when God, opened my mind to develop that interest. And I was playing junior hockey for one, and I missed a few Friday night games, which didn't go over well with the team. And so I eventually had to quit playing at that competitive level, at the level where it would have taken me further. I just couldn't do it. They wouldn't permit me to miss games like that. And baseball, basically the same thing. I was playing in a senior league in Vancouver that I remember playing some Friday night games that started well enough before sunset, and you just hope that it ended before sunset. I would sort of play third base and stand on the bag so I could see the sun a little longer as it was going down. But a little bit of an exaggeration. But that's where the tough part comes into, keeping the Sabbath and playing in a competitive sports scenario. It gets hard. Mm-hmm. It does get hard, and eventually I've only been ordained a minister for about 15 years now. And that happened in Global, and so how that comes about, I still, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. It's more of a calling and a realization of that calling, similar to coming into the truth of the understanding. We've got to, many are called, few are chosen. Exactly true.
Right.
And I think that that just evolved into a point where you recognize the need in God's church, and you have to follow that calling. We have to be 100% certain who leads God's church.
Right.
It's not Mr. Weston. It's Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so you recognize. First of all, you come to a realization and recognize your abilities. I recognized fairly early that I wasn't going to make a living playing sports. I mean, I was pretty certain of that. So that eased the pain of leaving that, fantasy in my head, I guess I could say, to leave that and follow a different path was easy to do. But that being said, competitive sports takes a certain edge to the way you play the game. You've got to play it not the way Paul described it, in Corinthians, where you play by the rules and you're a good loser as well as a good winner. You have to play to win, and it's at the cost of the other person,
Right.
which is not the biblical way of playing a sport. So I had to basically leave both those sports for a number of years. I quit playing baseball, not so much. I kept playing softball, major men's fastball, it's called up there. But hockey, I had to leave hockey for about 8 years because I found I couldn't maintain a proper attitude on the ice. You had to play at a level that was, I describe as not Christian. You had to despise the opposition just about. And there's going to be no sports like that eventually, where it's all going to be conducive to good sportsmanship, I guess you could say. I appreciate good competition. I like competing. Right. I think it's good for people to compete against one another. And as Paul said, you play to win.
Right.
You play to win, but it's all how you win, and how you lose. But I think it's important to be a competitive opponent. You can ask my wife. I mean, we over the COVID years, I think it's when it started. We sort of make this. We have this ongoing crib game in the middle of the day, and at lunchtime we play 2 games of crib.
Really?
In the middle of the day, and we compete. I mean, you can talk to her about it, and I want to beat her. She wants to beat me, but at the end of the day, she still makes me dinner.
Right.
So I mean, and she was an athlete too, so she knows how to compete.
Right.
And so we have fun at it. But I think it's competition is good for people. I think it really is, and that's what an aspect of sports that I think is important that kids need to understand. It's not, it's not about just destroying the enemy, and it's about just the whole adrenaline rush of competing, but being able to control that competition and your whole attitude, the controlling of it is important.
I had a 20-something-year-old man here. I didn't want to call him a young man. Asked me specifically because he gets really competitive when he plays things, and how did I cope with it? What did I do with it? And the thing is, I'm not a great person to ask about that because while I played a lot of sports, I was not super competitive. I mean, I would play to win, don't get me wrong, but if I lost, it rarely bothered me. I wouldn't say that it never bothered me. There were times that it did bother me, but in general, it didn't bother me so much. What is something maybe you could share with our audience? Because I know a number of young individuals that get extremely competitive and really upset when they lose. What did you do to balance that out? And because it sounds like you would have, especially when you were younger, had a pretty good competitive streak running through you. How did you cope with handling losing? I guess.
Keep a good attitude about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would typically translate that. I don't know, what do you call it? The anger or the disgruntledness of frustration of losing. I would take that and translate that into the next game.
Okay.
I would take that and say, okay, next time I'm going to win, type of thing, and take that and do what it takes to win. It's not just a matter of playing the game. It's everything that goes on in between the competitions. Training is a huge thing, a huge what some would look at as a downside to sports. I mean, I got to work out every day, to get that. Yeah, that's what Paul talks about, running a race to win. The competition. In those same verses, it talks about building a tower and the foundation. You got to build that foundation and earn your way to that victory. It's not just something that's just going to fall in your lap. It takes a lot of effort, as does our Christian life. You translate that aspect of sports and what it takes to be a winner, and you translate that into our daily life. I think that's the amazing part of that whole parallel metaphor that Paul uses, and why I think it's so important. He watched the Olympic type athletes competing for that one prize. No second or third, for the one prize that they competed for. There was, you win or you're a nobody type of thing. And he used that aspect of daily life to show us that's what our life is like too. When we strive for the kingdom, that there's one goal, there's one prize, and that's what we're striving for. It doesn't mean you run over people to get there, but there's that one prize at the end, and that's what we got to strive for and what we're aiming for.
Maybe
So
that's
it's-
something I can ask you about, because one of the things that, again, not having been a sportsy type and doing those things that came naturally to me, academic things I enjoyed, but because I, believe it or not, I did go to contests, like programming contests, and things like that. But that said, part of what you start to realize is, this is going to sound obvious for you, so I'm just forgive me. But the game, the work to win the game didn't just happen at the game. People talk about the effort they put out. Oh, they left it all on the field. They did that. But it was all the practice ahead of time. It's all what you're doing with your life in between the games. You can do all the wrong things with your life between the game, and then you can work as hard on the field as you possibly could, but that's not going to be enough if you didn't do all the things otherwise. And so, you cited this verse before in terms of Paul writing about, running the race to win, to win the prize. But if you really are running to win the prize, then it's not just a matter of the race itself. If you're thinking of a broader thought of an athlete, he's got to structure his life in terms of what does he do to prepare for that race, the choices that he makes here and there when he's in the marketplace, the food that he decides to buy, or how he's going to spend his day. If he doesn't spend that day in certain ways, if he doesn't buy the right food in the marketplace, in the end, he's not going to be able to do that. So it really is kind of for the elite athletes in particular, it's a whole mindset, right? For their whole life.
Exactly. I think most people would be shocked at the regimented lifestyle that an elite athlete lives. I mean, it is regimented. And to me, that just translates directly into what we're trying to do in this life to gain our place in the spiritual family of God. You've got to apply everything we've learned, all the fruits of the Spirit, and everything that we have to work at to get to that prize is like an elite athlete. What they have to do, they've got to maintain their workout schedule, like you say, their diet. It's very restricted diets in athletes these days. It would shock you to see what most teams now have dietitians, nutritionalists, and chefs that travel with each team everywhere they go. They don't typically, when they're competing, they don't typically go down to the Burger King down the road. They're having their food prepared for them by the nutritionalist and the chefs that are with the team cooking their food. My brother had a live-in chef the whole time he was playing. He had a live-in chef that lived right with him in his house.
Really? Like specific for him?
Cooked all his meals for him. And,
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I have a live-in chef too, and I'm not an elite athlete, so I married her even. Yeah.
Well, like 50 years ago, this wasn't always the case, but these days, it doesn't matter what, basketball, football, baseball, all of them, when the season ends, those guys will take a few weeks off and take a vacation, but then they get back into training because, for them, off season means getting ready for the next season. And if you don't, you could take off the off season, but you're going to show up with a bunch of guys who didn't, and you're going to be behind the curve.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So to me, that translates directly into our lives now. I mean, we can't afford to take time off. We don't take 2 weeks off of Christianity. Right, it's a full-time job to do it, and a prime example of what you just mentioned is my Vancouver Canucks, the hockey team of the West.
That's why you made that face when I want to tell. I know I'm interrupting you. Tell you a quick funny story. I was telling Mr. Walker how when I was in high school, so this would have been in the 80s. ESPN, so we finally had cable, and ESPN had gotten some rights to some NHL games, and they were playing them, and I had no rooting interest. I'm living in Texas, but there's this team that had the coolest logo. It was the Calgary Flames. I'm telling Mr. Walker this, and his countenance darkens. But I thought, I didn't know who you were a fan of. I thought maybe you were an Edmonton Oiler fan. But anyway, I just picked them strictly off of their logo.
Logos.
And they had also this guy, I think Laney McDonald, and he had a big red beard, and that was kind of cool too. And
Yeah, big mustache, big long handlebar mustache.
So Vancouver fan, that explains a lot.
So the Vancouver Canucks.
So anyway, yeah. So back to what I was going to say is that they have a player. I won't say his name. Don't want to embarrass anybody, but he last year I said to somebody, I said, until they get rid of that guy, they're going nowhere. And surprisingly, this year he came out like a house on fire. And right now, I think he's the leading scorer, leading number of goals in the NHL today.
Really?
Close to it anyway. I'm not sure in the last week or so, but apparently he was a real slacker in the off season, as to what you're saying. But last summer, he went on a strict diet and a strict regimen of training, and he's turned his whole game around. I was shocked when I seen him come out there this year. So. Yeah, it's so true that the off season is a lot of work, and if you don't do your due diligence, you will pay the price.
I think about that every year when we come back from the feast, because when I started speaking, I don't remember. Oh no, I totally took this idea from Mr. Hernandez. He has a sermon he does on the early and the latter rains. He was talking about the season. So this year at the feast, I had a sermonette on the last great day. And I'd pull out that sermonette because I really like that one, which is, I come back from the feast, and the baseball playoffs are going on, football's in full swing, basketball started, and you just want to come back and just let down. And Mr. Hernandez points out that's the worst time. You need to come back preparing your next harvest for the spring holy days.
Exactly right. I remember that sermon as well.
Yeah, so from the perspective of so our audience are teenagers and young adults in the church, and a lot of them into sports in a variety of ways. Some of them are maybe in school and on a sports team, or in the case of my kids, they were homeschooled, but still they did have they were doing sports through. In that particular case, it's not really the YMCA. I guess it was kind of a guy teaching fencing. He did something on the side, but it was a local teacher and local club. And then you have young adults. There's a lot of leagues out there. I know some. In fact, some people might even be listening. Some wonderful folks out there in up north in Omaha and side who play fantastic volleyball, just very good at what they do. And I know there's pros and cons. There's kind of like anything the world comes up with, right? There's you look at it. It's kind of like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's going to be things you can learn, things that are great, and you've already covered so many of those things. But there's also pitfalls. There's things that we have to watch out for in terms of mindsets, in terms of what we can get caught up in. And so we thought it might be helpful to hear from you, elaborate. You've already elaborated on so many of those things, but some things that you might recommend to our younger listeners, maybe some of them as young as you were in high school when you were facing some of these things, and then some of them facing that even afterward, outside as well. What would you say to them concerning things like if you're going to play a sport, then play it as a Christian and keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. Versus also, if you're a Christian first and a sportsman second, and you have to keep that in mind as well. So I kind of give you a blank check, so to speak, to write however you like. Not an actual check, just so you know.
Okay.
But so by the way, predicting that one guy, they wouldn't amount to anything unless they get rid of him. And then so I guess you're not a prophet. You can officially declare, you missed that call. So
I did. Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, it's on record.
I still would give you credit because your point was still valid, but the player made a significant change that changed his fortunes.
Well,
that's true. So,
there's so many parallels between sports, athletics, and our Christian walk and race. There's so many parallels. That's next to the resurrections. That was one of the things that intrigued me the most, was the parallel that I learned through the Apostle Paul of athletics and sports. I thought, me staying in sports as much as I could, and my kids staying in sports as much as they could, would aid us going forward in our Christian walk. It would help us to develop certain aspects of stick-to-itiveness, endurance, training, the need to train for whatever it is you're going to do. I mean, let's face it, if you're going to be good at anything, you've got to put in the time. You've got to do the training, no matter what it is. And athletics is, I think, a prime opportunity to learn an aspect of what it takes to do well at whatever that discipline may be, and then apply that to our walk, in our daily life and in our Christian pursuit. So it's something that it takes some effort. As a parent growing up, raising kids, and and growing in the church, it was difficult at times to find a way for our kids to be on sports teams and to learn that aspect of competition, and still maintain the walk that we wanted them to go in. So I did that myself as a parent, mostly by being as much involved in what they did myself, because I had the ability to coach hockey and coach baseball. I got involved with that, not as the head coach of any team, but as an assistant coach, or doing my part to not only help the team, but to help my kid be able to stay on the team. So it takes an effort, and there's going to come a point. There's going to come a point where it just won't happen anymore. It gets too competitive as kids get older. It gets more competitive and harder to keep the kid on the team. But I'm all for trying to do the best you can to do it. But with that said, you've got to have a realistic, perspective of what you expect out of it. You certainly can't, as a parent, live your life or live your aspirations and dreams through your kid.
Right.
I've seen that before, where that's
Really?
a problem. That runs into being a problem.
So like a parent who might have been frustrated by or didn't quite achieve the heights they thought they could, but they think their child can.
Right. Well, even someone like me, but, I certainly I am not going to blame the church for my lack of being able to pursue my dreams. I wouldn't do that at all, because I definitely know I made the right choice. There's no doubt about that. But that could happen with a parent living those aspirations through their child, and that's not the right way, because sometimes the kid may not even have the desire to pursue what you want them to be in. I'm sure your kids love fencing, but if it was you that loved fencing, you couldn't force them to go.
Right.
If my kids didn't like baseball or hockey, I made sure I didn't force them to do it, because I thought they should be there, and you better do good at it, or you're going to have to deal with me, type of thing. And so you got to be careful that it's what they want to do as well as much as what you want them to do.
Right.
And it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge, but I think what they learn from the experience is worth the effort if it if it's supposed to go that way, so to speak.
I've solved our problem. So I actually looked up the definition of sport, and it was quite clarifying, actually. An activity involving physical exertion, so that's the first criteria, and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So it sounds like for it to be considered a sport, it has to have some physicality to it, and somebody has to be trying to stop you. So that would technically eliminate bowling and golf, and certainly chess. Well, you're competing against somebody, but it's not physical exertion. So
Right.
I think he's stretching it a little bit there, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, but you also said that you you had some decisions to make, right? I mean, you said that you had your ambitions and you were playing fairly well, but in your case, the Sabbath just kept getting in the way. And what was it like to make that call, and what calculations were kind of going on in your head? And how old were you about that time?
Well, I started developing an interest in what I was searching for at about 16. So I was 17, 18 when I was playing the sports where that could have led to university scholarships, is what I was thinking is the direction I wanted to go in. And there was talk. There was people around saying, you have this opportunity, but I put a big emphasis on the calling to God's church. It meant something to me, because I was looking for something, and I didn't want to sort of look a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. Right? I mean, I was given this opportunity, and I was able to discern the difference between which one was going to be the most beneficial in the long run. And sports, to me, was not going to be beneficial in the long run, other than the social aspect of it. Being able to golf with a few friends and having a beer on the 19th hole was about as far as I was going to get in the game of golf, and same with hockey and baseball. But to me, when I understood the resurrections and seen the eternity of it, I guess you could say, and the benefits of what I was about to venture into, I was able and discerned correctly, I suppose is the way to say it. And I think when you have the support, eventually I had the support of my wife, but it was even before we were married, we supported each other that way, right? We knew what we were looking for. And as just as friends, before we even formally dated, we were just friends in school. But we were both looking for the meaning of life, I guess, is the way we describe it.
Right.
So, when you put it all together and you really analyze what is important and you're able to make a good judgment and the right discernment, I think that is critical to, I guess, being real. You got to be realistic, right? I mean, you can't live in a fantasy world. You won't get anywhere in a fantasy world.
And, we have families listening as well. A lot of parents out there, we love you parents listening to the podcast with your teens. And some of them, they probably have some teenagers who are just fantastic at basketball, and it's just causing some frustration. The coach has made, I just picked basketball, but the coach has made some concessions because, some games are on Friday. He knows that his star player can only play for so long. But there's clearly some frustration. It's starting to have some difficulty, and there's the growing sense, maybe even amongst the high schooler himself, that he needs to make a decision. He needs to decide what's important to him. And it sounds like, based on what you're saying, that the parents can help by helping them put everything in perspective and to really think it through. I mean, in the end, even if you are a future I'll pick Michael Jordan because some might say LeBron James. I think I tried to use him the other day, but Mr. Robinson, that's more our age, it'd be Michael Jordan. But, even if you were a future Michael Jordan whose play is going to consider to symbolize the entire sport for a whole generation, on the other hand, the eternal perspective, there'll be a time when we're millions or billions of years of existing in the family of God. And how many people are actually going to say, well, boy, I wish I'd have kind of given this up because I really enjoyed basketball.
There is a deep lesson here for our audience today in Mr. Walker's life. He found the pearl of great price. He sold everything for it. And it's not a trivial matter of what you gave up, especially if you were such a sports lover, to be able to get scholarships. You could have paid your way conceivably through college. That's a pretty big deal. Who knows if you played at a collegiate level, where you could have gone professionally. I mean, you potentially gave up quite a lot, and you kind of counted as nothing here sitting in this room comparatively because you found the truth, and that was far more valuable to you than anything you were at such a young age to recognize.
Well, I think we all find the pearl of great price, in God's church. It's a matter of recognizing it and understanding what it really means. I think that's critical. And I was blessed to be able to do that at a young age, I think, and obviously sounds like you did as well, right? I mean, it's not a matter of finding it because God finds us.
That's right.
First of all,
That's
and
right.
second of all, it's up to us to make the choice and the decisions to pursue it. So I have no inhibitions or no regrets about my choice at all, none whatsoever. In fact, I'm very happy where I'm at right now,
Right.
because I guess because I have a firsthand perspective of what it's like to live in the world of high fashion and high recognition. My brother suffers the ability to even go shopping for his own clothes, type of thing, and not a type of thing that was very accurate. He typically had clothes brought to him to pick out and to buy.
Wow.
Because there's the high profile life is not all it's cut out to be. It's not. It's like who was it? Howard Hughes that said you'd give up all the money he ever had just to have one happy marriage. And that's very accurate in the world of the rich and famous. And so, what's the old saying? Money doesn't buy you happiness, or money doesn't buy you love, or whatever it is. I forget now. But
right.
and it's so true. It is very true. And I think when a person comes to that realization, and I'm thankful I did at a young age. When you come to that realization, what you learn real quick what's important, and it is that pearl of great price, like you say.
I might even recommend, based on what you're saying, the verse that came to my mind is in the 2 verses in Luke 14, where Christ says at the beginning of his discourse here, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And we understand he doesn't mean literally hate them and not love them, but rather love them less than you love me, dramatically so. But then when it says his own life also, I think it's too easy sometimes to think that he's saying, unless you're willing to die. Well, of course, that is a part of it. You do need to grow to be willing to die. But actually, to a certain extent, it's almost more painful to live while giving up some of the things you love so much, forsaking all you have, like it says later. You've got to be able to be willing to forsake whatever it is you have that might be in the way.
Yep.
And that's a painful thing, because you got to continue living, but you won't get to do the thing that you loved so much. And I kind of see that in what you're talking about.
That's exactly right. I made that statement myself not too long ago, I think in a sermon.
Oh, really? Was it
expanded on that very verse.
If it was, I would give you credit, because I get to hear that sermon. Okay, good.
No,
I don't feel
it wasn't.
so bad.
I don't think it all sort of blends together after a while. But I did mention that verse does include a lot more than what it says there. It's giving up the some of the things you have in your life, hobbies, friends. Sometimes there's a lot more to it, a lot more specificity to it than just your parents, which it doesn't mean. It's all about prioritizing, right?
Right.
You got to put things in the proper order of priority, and if you get them out of order, if you should try to shuffle them around a little bit, it won't work.
Right.
It doesn't work.
I've thought about that with when Christ says in the same passage, he's talking about if you're not willing to bear your cross, and it's easy to think, oh, he means dying. It's like, well, no, like your cross might be, I'm not going to get to play sports, you know, or in college or wherever that might be, and you might think, well, no, surely not. But for those who've given up those kind of things, it feels like they just put their cross on their shoulder and they're bearing this burden. But he's not saying that it's not a good trade. He said, in fact, you have to be willing to make the trade to discover you've done the right thing,
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's it gets to be tough sometimes. It really does, to give up the things that you really come to. Well, things that you've done all your life in some respect, right? I mean, I did sports all my life. That was all I knew until I got open my mind to other things that are bigger and better than what is in sports. Now, I think, with that being said, I think there's a huge lesson to be learned just from the training aspect of sports, because the training aspect of sports actually, I think, is even maybe a better parallel to our life than it is competing in the actual game. It's what we do in between, like we've mentioned already. How we live our lives, how we approach the situations we find ourselves in, because it can be difficult when you are one of the better players on a team, and then they recognize that you're not going to be there all the time, because they develop a certain attitude towards you. They're not recognizing that you're accepting God's calling and you found this pearl of great price. They're not recognizing that.
Right.
They're recognizing. They think of you as being a non-team member. You don't like the team. You love your God more than you love our team. Yeah, and they don't understand that.
Your culture, whatever, your habits, this thing you want to do. Instead of us. Yeah.
That's right. So you've got to be able to. If you want to play on a sports team, you've got to be able to accept that and realize that, and have the intestinal fortitude, so to speak, to endure that, because it will get tough. And as you get older, it gets harder. When my kids were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, it was me that was dealing with it. But when they get to be a little older, now they've got to deal with it. They've got to be able to tell their friends. So it gets hard. So I think just to develop an aptitude towards a sport that you can compete with. My son went from hockey, because they were born and raised in the church, my kids, and so he got to a point where he said, Dad, I just don't think I want to play hockey or baseball anymore. That was about 16 or so. Okay. And he said, I want to golf. I just want to golf. And so he did. And he's now a scratch golfer. He's a very good golfer. He went to the San Diego Golf Academy to get his degree in golf course management. So, But so it's a sport still, but golf takes as much physical training as any other sport, believe it or not. I mean, that was a twist that Tiger Woods brought to the game, was the physical training aspect of it. And that now you see the good golfers now, they look like they could be a football player. Literally. I mean, that's the whole nature of the game.
Very fit.
So very fit, very fit. So, there's an aspect of the training that I think is very helpful to help us along our path. The training aspect is directly parallel to our Christian life, and I think it's good for everybody to maintain some sort of training, physical training in their life. As hard as it is, I know, and especially when we get older. I think I'm older than both of you guys here, and so I'll say it gets tougher each day, but it aids you in so many ways, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and let's face it, it's hard to be really as spiritual as we'd like to be if we are ailing physically, and I think that's a biblical principle as well, isn't it? Right? I mean, we desire that health so that we can worship God, and keep looking after our health physically, I think, is important. I think it's very beneficial, as painful as it is, as it can be.
I've appreciated that in the church, that emphasis that I'm doing my best to act on even better, more than like I should here in the, I was going to say in my latter years. I shouldn't say that. You're older than us, but in my 50s. But that you're right. As your body starts to naturally deteriorate, entropy happens. At the same time, it can take your attention away from the things you do. You can't serve as well if you can't go to somebody's house and go to help. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking care of your body is not just a vanity thing or something. Taking care of your health actually enables you to be a better servant. Jesus Christ couldn't have walked around Galilee his whole life if he wasn't someone who actually didn't take care of his body and actually seek to maintain his health.
Well, the whole parallel of being the temple of God's Holy Spirit is, something we should realize and take seriously. Even though I know, I'll say it again, I know it's hard. Physical exercise can be a bother. But I think it benefits us in so many different ways, and that's a direct, parallel to athletics, sports, physical fitness and development is something we should think about anyway.
Right.
But don't always just think about it, because that won't help at all. You can't build biceps by thinking about it.
Oh, that would be fantastic. You could do that. Well, Dr. Morell, in his booklet on health, has a whole chapter on that the body is designed to move. I mean, really, if you're seeking to use your body, you're actually taking some joy in what God created to do those things. You're actually enjoying His creation by moving it in all the ways He designed.
And not just the muscles, the bones are that way too. I worked in that industry. I don't know if I didn't even get to that. What I did for 40 years.
Oh no! What did you do?
But for 40 years, I actually sold joints. For 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, hip and knee joints.
Wow, the artificial kind. I'm
artificial
hoping.
joints,
kind of spooky.
Yeah, but so I learned a lot about bone and bone structure and the need to stress bone. Bone without stress will just atrophy away, just like muscle does.
Really, because it's designed to receive stress.
It's a law. It's actually called Wolff's Law. It's basically summarized. It's use it or lose it, and that applies not only to muscle but also to bone.
So that's why don't astronauts experience some kind of bone loss or deterioration?
That's exactly
because they're
what
not in a gravity-based environment.
That's why they try to exercise the astronauts in space, which is a hard thing to do. But they do have. I actually have one. It's a vibrating plate that you just stand on, and it vibrates, and it actually builds your core muscles.
Really?
Yeah.
I imagine it's hard for them to exercise enough to compensate for such a weightless environment
for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, it is interesting to know that the body does require that certain amount of exercise to perform at its peak. It needs to move, like you say. It's so true.
Well, we have kept you. I assured you would be here for under an hour, and I know recording time wise, we're actually right about there at an hour. So, well, I'll let you go. But I did find the verse that you've highlighted it several times. I thought I'd wrap up reading it to honor this was the one you brought up, and You talked about Paul and his comments meaning so much to you, and kind of opening your mind to other things. And pretty sure what you're referring to is in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, starting in verse 24. Do you not know that those who run a race all run, but one, no second place, no third place, one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And then in the next verse, he highlights exactly, go figure, you're saying biblical things. To me, he talks about how this is not just the race, it's the life in between the races. The very next verse, verse 25. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. That is, they do consider their life in between the race. They've got to do that. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown. But of course, we're doing this to obtain an imperishable crown. So that's the passage you were thinking of, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it weighed on my mind a lot when I first started coming to church. I thought, like I say, this is pretty cool. That anybody, especially the Apostle Paul, would take the whole concept of sports and athletics and compare that to our spiritual pursuits was pretty cool. Because it means something, right? I mean, it wouldn't be preserved for us if it didn't mean something. It's there for us to be admonished to, hey, look, this is where, God's Spirit is going to dwell. Take care of it. Look after it the best you can. And I think it develops a discipline in us. When we do physical things, it develops a spiritual discipline as well. There's a parallel. And sometimes it's hard to get, but I think if people kids study that enough and think, and then you go to, where is it, 2 Corinthians, where it talks about playing by the rules as well. I forget exactly what chapter that is, but it talks about how it's required to play by the rules. Well, that's not the rules of hockey or baseball or golf. It applies to that, I suppose, but to me that means God's rules. You got to play according to His rules to win the prize. So it's all that direct interconnecting parallel that is pretty cool.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming by. We really appreciate it. It's a long trip for you to be here for the Charlotte Family Weekend. Grateful that you were willing to make it. And when are you heading out?
Thursday morning, so another day, and then we head home.
All the more it's your last day. Well, thank you for spending so much of your time here with us today.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Smith and Robinson.